Good afternoon, everyone. We'll just get started in just a second. So AGP 9.0 and beyond. I was going to start with the caveat. This is not an official Google talk. I did not go through all of the process to make it an official Google talk. So these are my opinions. I am one of the TLs on Gradle plugins, so obviously my opinions do count for something. But yeah, please don't take me hostage to any of the promises I make. If you have any problems, you can contact me on any of my public social media, of which I don't have any, sorry. But yeah, let's begin. So I am a software engineer on Android Studio, specifically Android Gradle plugin and the integration of Android Gradle plugin into Android Studio. I've been at Google 11 years now. So I started off as a junior developer almost straight out of university. I now manage a small team that works on this alongside the other TL called Jerome. And the reason I've stuck around is you guys, actually. It's really rewarding developing software for software engineers. Hopefully, if I fix something, I make your day-to-day better. I either make your work faster, better, or your hobby project a little bit smoother. So it's really, really great when you get that bit of feedback that something that we've done has hopefully made your guys' development lives a bit better. Just a tiny bit about me. So this is me. This is my wife, Rachel. And I kind of hope that actually if we can get this right, we make space for the more important things in life too. Like, not just that you kind of squeeze more in. Me and my wife run a little church community for homeless people on Sundays, and that is like a core part of my life. I also lead a community choir jointly with a few other people. So that's them singing, that's me conducting. It's not a very good picture of me conducting. But anyway, who are you? So I guess you're here because you're interested in tools for building Android apps. Who here extends AGP in any way? Couple? Who here uses like third-party plugins in their build? Yeah, okay, majority. So yeah, I wanted to just give a little bit of background first, somehow, about kind of how I'm thinking about these things, about where we're coming from in terms of the positioning of what the Gradle tooling is like and how it fits in with the wider ecosystem, what we're doing about the AGP release schedule, what we're landing in AGP 9.0, what we're doing in 10 in about a year's time, the future of sync, the future of Gradle build scripts, some time for question and answers, somehow in 40 minutes. But I will try and actually leave a decent amount of time for Q&A because I think that is really valuable. Cool, so how I think about tooling for Android apps. I've been here a while and I've seen all sorts of different things. And I think one of the really cool things about the tooling is that it isn't just driven by one company. It's actually driven by, well, Google, Gradle, JetBrains, and a whole community of other engineers that contribute in all sorts of ways. And I think that means that while it makes making some sort of top-down changes harder, I think the tools are way better for it. I think it actually means that we get something that really meets your guys' needs. But build is a tool. It's a means to an end. There aren't that many people who wake up in the morning and think, I'm just going to make my build better. Normally you have a reason. And so it's not necessarily your primary focus. And so a key part of the way we think about this is we want to make things that work well, even when it's not your main focus trying to work on the build. Simplicity and flexibility are both really important, and they are sometimes in opposition. So we're looking for solutions that can actually deliver both in harmony. When we write documentation, I've written most of the AGP 9.0 release notes. So everyone who asked for release notes, you have them, or like 2,500 words of them. We're trying to be opinionated, we're trying to explain why, but not prescriptive. We don't want to stop you doing things, even if that's not how we thought we want to use the tool. Performance scalability, also a really key part of what we're thinking about. If the tools aren't performant, they're just annoying and they get in your way. And like I said, the ecosystem of published plugins, of build logic, of your own build scripts all interplay. They're all really important. They're all a big part of making success for Android app developers in general. And they all have slightly different needs. So we think carefully about the distinction between those. So talking about AGP 9. So this is our second release since we adopted semantic versioning. And we follow Gradle. So we skipped from 4 to 7. So we aligned the major with Gradle. So we're not imposing a major version bump of Gradle on you in a minor version bump of AGP, because that's not really in the spirit of semantic versioning. But this is only actually the second major release we have done under this scheme. And then the other big thing that's kind of on the mind for AGP 9 is the legacy variant API, which is Android application variants, if you've kind of encountered that. A lot of plugins are built on top of this. How did I write it here? Regrettable. There are a lot of things in that API that we really wish were not in that API. It's very easy to get from that API to internal implementation details of AGP that we really cannot reasonably support in a way that means that we don't break you between major releases. It also, there's a bunch of design decisions about that API that in retrospect we're like, this wasn't quite the right way to do it. It's very late in the process, so it means that we can't respond to plugins by changing the graph of tasks, because one of the things exposed in the API is are the tasks themselves. And so these two things together, sorry, I should say, all of the notes are here. Sorry, I was giving myself an aside and I forgot about it. I'll come back to that in a second. So all of the notes are on for AGP 9 are on this URL. We try to keep them up to date and try to make sure they cover everything. File bugs if they're not. We do want to get this right and try and help you. The upgraded system in Android Studio is set up to opt you out of a lot of the new behaviors. So I'll give a really good example. There's a bunch of breaking changes, and where we can, we've done them behind flags. But if you upgrade from 8 to 9, or 8.13 to 9.0, Android Studio will actually opt you back out of most of those behaviors so that we can get you upgraded without breaking you and give you a chance to kind of fix things in your own time, not blocking the actual upgrade. So a good example of this is in AGP 9.0, we changed the semantic of R8 so that if you write keep class of a class name, it no longer implies keeping the default constructor of that class. This sounds like a fairly innocuous change. It turns out it breaks loads of things. Lots of people were depending on this implicit behavior. So it's behind a flag. When you upgrade, we turn that off. You can try turning that flag on, see if your test pass, see if your release build looks good, move on with life. But you're not, hopefully, blocking your 9.0 upgrade on dealing with, hey, my app crashes in production in this screen that turns out we didn't have a proper integration test for. So back to the thing I forgot to interrupt myself with. Talk about the legacy variant API. Sorry, I should also say that that was just one example. So obviously there are a bunch of source breaking changes, although we don't actually promise to not make source level breaking changes in minor versions, although we try not to. But there are some binary breaking changes. There's some features that have been deprecated for a while that we've actually removed, and various other things that might trip you up on that upgrade process. But the big one, the application variants API, which looks something like this. I'm sure many of you have seen something in a build script harshly probably copied from somewhere else without really understanding what it actually meant. And then this is the new thing. And they look pretty much the same in the sense that both are just callbacks. Well, one is in a named domain which contain, one isn't. But fundamentally, there's some bit of functionality the way you're customizing the build. And for some things, there's a one-on-one correspondence where it's actually pretty easy to translate from what was to what is. For other things, there really isn't, because the top one exposes a bunch of our internals in a way that we cannot support. So there are some things where we keep finding out, hey, I was doing this with the old variant API, of a use case we just never thought of. We didn't even realize necessarily was possible to do with the old variant API, but someone creatively managed to figure out a way of doing it. The new API also runs earlier, as I mentioned before, so before the tasks are created. So that means that we can actually be much smarter about optimizing the build. So for example, if you instrument classes, we now know if you're registering that or not. So we don't have to, we can use a faster path of not collecting everything in together to pass through that instrumentation for your debug build. Say you didn't have it turned on for your debug build, but you had it on your release. So we can actually respond to what the plugins are doing and optimize what AGP does in a much more founded way. Things are lazy, things that when you ask for everything, it actually gives you everything because the thing is a provider. Whereas in the old API, if you ask for everything, if someone else added something after you, well, game's over, you don't have it. So in AGP 9, we haven't got rid of the old API, but we have made it opt-in required. So we are making quite a loud signal that this old thing, we've deprecated for several years now, is actually going to go away because we really, really want to get the plugin system on the new thing. And some of that is selfish. Some of that is like really do not want to maintain that old thing. Some of the interactions between those two APIs are really quite painful for us. But the bigger picture thing is for plugins, if you're based on that old API, we will break you in exciting and fun ways because we just do not have a good handle on the surface that you use because you can touch almost all the internals. This API, we actually have a chance of supporting and actually keeping to our promise of semantic versioning. So yeah, sorry, that was it. So yeah, the whole point of this is to hopefully make it upgrade easier. And I know there's some pain for the 9 to 10 transition especially, and I think 10 is going to be hard because I really hope that you guys don't all stay opted out until the end of 9 series and then have to panic at 10. But hopefully we can actually push the ecosystem forward. And actually we've had a lot of good progress with moving not just third-party things, but actually a bunch of other things in Google that don't come from our team and making sure that everything is compatible. So yeah, if you want to learn more about extending AGP and what to do, we have some really nice examples. And I think those examples are probably the easiest way, rather than trying to read the reference documentation to start with. So on the Android Gradle recipes, we have them versioned per AGP version. So the 9.0 is all of the ones that are compatible with 9, and they will kind of show you the best practice and hopefully be a model that you can copy about how to extend your build. So plugins we have broken includes Kotlin plugin. So we've actually taken over the Kotlin support in AGP. So rather than applying the JetBrains Kotlin plugin as well as AGP, AGP now has Kotlin support by default. There is a flag to turn it back off again if you want. There's also an incremental migration if you need it. But essentially, in a simple case, you just don't need to apply the plugin anymore. It just works. For KMP, it also has the same problem. This is slightly more subtle. So rather than using the Android library plugin alongside the Kotlin multi-platform plugin, you use this new integration. There is a larger difference between these two. If nothing else, the combination of Android variants and KMP's platforms got very confusing very fast, and you had silly things like Android test. So the new world is much more sensible, much easier to understand, more efficient, but it is different. So that migration might be slightly harder for you. And there are other plugins, most of which are just you need to upgrade. There aren't so many fundamental changes. Underneath the Kotlin plugin are more plugins, because there are plugins that are on top of plugins that are on top of plugins. In particular, KAPT, which is kind of in maintenance mode from JetBrains' perspective. So we actually have implemented it internally in AGP so that you've got somewhere to go, hence the name Legacy, because we do not expect people to be adopting KAPT newly right now, because it is not the future, but this works. KSP, the sources of KSP are compatible with 9.0, but there is not currently a release. It's happening hopefully this next, I guess, 4 days before we branch next week. And there are a few others that this definitely breaks and affects. The Kotlin Gradle plugin was actually exposing the Android Gradle plugin's legacy APIs as part of its API surface, which was a slightly alarming discovery from embarrassingly not that long ago. Okay. And then this is roughly our timeline, so I guess we are just about to hit the 9.0 thing. We're branching hopefully next week, going to stable before the end of the year. So your legacy APIs, and then in about a year's time, those APIs will be gone. Cool. I'm going to change topic now. So let me talk a little bit about sync, which is the other thing that I am one of the leads on. So sync consistently makes it to the top of the list of things people are unhappy about the tools, and it's kind of been like that most of the time I've been here. We get close, but we still definitely not making it lower down, and the tactic to make the rest of Studio worse is probably not the best one. So we have been sitting down, both ourselves and with Gradle and JetBrains together to try and figure out what can we do to fundamentally transform this space. And so I have a little demo. Let's see if this works. So this demo is, I am going to open the same project in Android Studio Otter stable that just went out, and the current, the current Canary. Actually, the project is upgraded to AGP 9 as well, but that's not a huge amount of difference. I almost had a demo that was dependent on the conference Wi-Fi being bad, in a sense that this is to show you what happens when you, at the moment, in the current world, if I open a project that I have not opened before, where we go. You see here. So I'm thinking I can look at the files, but I can't really do very much else. And certainly I'm not getting anything useful here. And I've artificially added a 60-second delay to the download of dependencies here to kind of make the point of you're not getting anything. It's not, you basically got a text editor until sync is finished. If I open the same project, or a different copy of it, but and this is just, I'm not using any magic flags here. This is all behavior you should have already. I've got that same 60-second delay. But if I have a look at my main activity, actually, I've already got navigation. I'm very happy that actually worked. I was waiting for that to not work. So we are, there's a lot of moving parts here. We've got new APIs from Gradle from about a year ago, or a bit over a year ago, where they now can stream results back rather than delivering everything at the end. We have a new framework in IntelliJ entirely rewriting sync. The current implementation of this is actually running the new thing and then running the old thing afterwards, which obviously is not awesome because there are certain things that don't work in the new thing yet. But if you use Canary, you'll actually get this behavior already. And the cost of the repeated work is actually not that high. So it turned out that it kind of comes out in the wash. And actually the benefit you get by indexing kicking in earlier on a decent machine is actually means that the whole process is faster despite the fact it's doing more work. Because it's not doing this bunch of single-threaded stuff right at the beginning. It's getting more stuff done in parallel. We are looking at all of the use cases. So that's, so now, yes, both of these now work. So yeah. Now I have everything working. But yeah. We're looking at all these cases in Studio, trying to figure out what actually makes sense to try and focus on making work, because there's a bunch of things that obviously assume you have everything, and telling things or lying to things saying, oh, you don't have the dependencies yet, but maybe you can still run, is a little bit tricky, but we're trying to figure out what those use cases actually are, and how we can kind of deliver fastest value with this. The other thing I wanted to talk about, actually I don't know why I've come back to here, because we are back in demo mode, is declarative. And this is actually quite an old, This is actually a very old example, but I just wanted to kind of show it as the point. So we've been working with Gradle and JetBrains and having some conversations about making that distinction between your plugins, your build logic, and actually what's in the scripts clearer. And we want to get to a point where actually they're not really build scripts anymore. They are just a declaration of what your build is. I guess other build systems kind of take this approach a bit more already. But getting from where we are now to there is obviously not entirely trivial. And from my perspective, I think this really applies both to, if you're getting started, at the moment, you can write all sorts of horrible things in your build scripts and get very confused very quickly. If you're in a big company where you've even got a team dealing with the build scripts, it's still a pain because you don't want the average engineer who doesn't know anything about Gradle to be just putting random things in your build scripts. Maybe you want a better separation where you actually like look at your build logic with more scrutiny, and you can let your build scripts kind of be edited more freely because you know that they can't do anything super awful in them. So if I just managed to put my 60-second delay here as well, that would be kind of bad. This demo is not going to work unless this actually syncs. But essentially, this file is entirely declarative. This file is understood by Gradle. We register in AGP a custom extension that looks a little bit more typed. We have the whole schema. Gradle has done various demos about this and talked about this quite a lot, so I won't go into huge amounts of detail from their perspective. The thing that we've done actually is build a bunch of IDE support, so you do get completion, which I was going to demo, but this isn't working. Sorry. But the nice thing, rather than getting completion for the entire Kotlin standard library or some random class that happens to be in a built-in class path, you get completion that is contextual to exactly where you're at. You can't type anything else. There's just a bunch of footguns that are just entirely gone because this is no longer an executable script, but actually just a declarative declaration of what to do. And it is interpreted in the end, but it's just trying to pin things down so that they are much more. The key thing that we haven't done yet, but we are working with Gradle to do, is to define the extensibility mechanism. Because one of the powerful things about Gradle is you can attach, by extension aware, DSL to other bits of DSL, and you can express really nicely like, oh, actually, I want to customize the setting by Android build type, and I'll put it in the, I'll add another block to Android build type, and I'll put the things through there. And that is like a key bit of functionality that I think really differentiates us and helps kind of mean you don't have to kind of repeat yourself over and over again about linking things together. Currently, there isn't a way to do that in declarative, but we are designing that with Gradle so that plugins can actually interact and you don't have to define this single software type that understands everything, but you can actually compose them together. Oh. So yeah, so I guess you can do, like, you literally just get the completion for the thing, the only last thing that's there. Like, so if I delete this enabled, you'll see, like, yeah, you don't get completion for anything else. You also, yeah, so the collaboration on our side was that we built the IDE side of this, which we will eventually, and are working with contributing back into the IntelliJ platform so that it kind of is there for everyone. I've talked way faster than I thought I would, so we've got a lot of time for questions. Does anyone have any questions? Go for it. Oh, I don't know whether there's a mic, but oh, cool, there is.
In the past, the Gradle sync, when you open the project, there was no Gradle sync. It just started working immediately. So now we have a problem that when you open a project, it starts syncing, and it takes a lot of time. But a few years ago, that wasn't there. Like, do you remember that time? Like, what happened?
I mean, for Gradle Android projects, we haven't fundamentally changed the semantic since I've been on the team, as far as I'm aware. It's possible that we've broken some caching. So it should be that if you, so for that demo, I had to copy the project into a new location because otherwise if I reopened it, it would just use the cached version. It wouldn't try and sync. But yeah, so I was kind of simulating opening a project for the first time for the purposes of that demo because that's the case where we've made it better. But yeah, if you're, feel free to come and we can have a chat afterwards if you're actually hitting on something where you just are seeing things forcing sync more often. That's not expected. Yeah.
Now that you're shipping KGP in AGP, how do you plan on like staying up to date with KGP? Like, is there a way for me, like if there was like a newer version of KGP that I wanted, do I have to opt out of your mechanism, or is there a way to like?
So the way it's implemented, the way it's implemented is AGP depends on like a KGP base plugin, so you can just bump the version of that on the build script class path. It's not. I wish there were a slightly nicer way of doing it, but that works. So we haven't quite figured out exactly how we're going to do updates because they do not do semantic versioning. So in theory, we shouldn't take an update of that plugin until the next major. I think that wouldn't be realistic. So we probably are going to have to figure that one out. But yeah, you can just bump it in the built class path. We are, the flip side is also that we are forcing a minimum KGP on you of a relatively recent version. That should not be an issue. If it is, like, please file bugs because we need to make sure that that isn't a blocker for you migrating.
Yeah, hi. I was just wondering, whenever you do Gradle sync, let's say that I change a dependency on one of my modules, does it actually run the, I guess, sync, like the configuration of all the modules every time? And why is that, if that's the case?
Yes, it does all of the work every single time. There is some caching at the lowest level in Gradle, but everything above is repeated every time. Part of the reason that is like that, and it's hard for us to change that, is that Gradle does not enforce that you cannot do horrible things like configuring one project from another project. So there is a long-term project that we have that I hadn't touched on called Isolated Project, which is kind of the next step after configuration cache that will say projects cannot configure each other. And once you have that, then you can start thinking, oh, actually, I changed this project. Okay, maybe that affects a downstream project, but it doesn't affect any of the things that this project depends on that don't depend on it. I can just cache the model. I can just return it.
Right, it makes sense, like, in theory, but I wonder if, like, as developers, should we be allowed to say, actually, just sync this one module, like, just add the dependencies for this particular module, because that's all I need. Because in our case, like, we have 900 modules, and yes, we have it cached, but even with the cache, when you have a lot of modules, it takes a while. So if I just add a dependency, all I need is the symbols for it, right? So,
yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't had anyone ask me exactly that before. I wouldn't want to ship that to everyone because I think it would be a bit of a foot gun. But yeah, we can definitely talk about if there is a sort of hack to get that working, because I think it makes total sense before we have the eventual solution that you'd want something that made things a bit faster. Yeah, the tricky part is that even if adding a dependency in one place, you can potentially cause downstream effects of, like the runtime class path of something else then might make your preview not work, right? So you've got to be slightly careful about that. But yeah, yeah, I can see why you want that. And I kind of hope that we actually manage to progress this isolated projects things this coming 12 months. Sorry, my year is set by our yearly summits with them, which we've just had a month ago. But yeah, that we have hopefully a real solution to this that isn't just, oh, trust, I just want this, and hopefully that kind of works.
Right, makes sense.
If you want a really, really awful way to do it, you can turn on IDEA as internal and just use the IDEA project structure dialog to mess with the project structure. I wouldn't recommend doing that because it will just be deleted straight away as soon as you sync, but yeah. If you're really kind of tweaking things over and over again, that's what I use for debugging quite a lot.
Right, thank you.
There was someone at the back. Was that? Yeah. Go for it. Sorry, I can't hear you. I can hear you now. No, it's fine. I'll come for it. So what were you saying?
Okay, there is a parameter inside of the AGP, which is test flag, for Kotlin fixtures that we quite extensively use, which is not enabled by default for all the Android modules. So I wonder what is the future behind it and what still keeps it from being a stable API at this point. Because every time we sync and every time we see it, we understand that it's still not ready yet.
Test fixtures, you just said?
Text fixtures with Kotlin, yes. So text fixtures with Java still should work, but with Kotlin they do not. So it works since 8.10, but it's been in beta or in alpha for a couple of recent versions.
Yes, that one has been an annoying, slightly stuck because of some noticeable bugs. We have just fixed all of them except one so the bugs mostly in the IDE import side. So they worked fine on the build side, but the modeling in the IDE was not correct. A bunch of stuff we had to fix for the built-in Kotlin support actually also fixed test fixtures. So it would either be AGP 9, it might be 9.1, where that will be called fully supported and will just work. Happy to be able to give the happy answer. Still got a minute. Anyone? Any other questions? If not, call it a day. Oh, thank you very much.